In this sharing, you will see a destruction of the so-called deconstruction zone by the legitimate line of Christ, and those showing the contradictions and the corrections that need to be made to this one that goes by Justin. This is somebody who has called people to whom he is speaking to sick, stating that they need help because of their belief in God. So we will begin here with an immediate contradiction when it comes to Justin speaking about his own self and his credentials to be able to make such claims about this truth, as we may be dealing with someone who has a tendency to lie, or perhaps a little bit of brain fog, as you see here.
I'm an expert in the Bible.
Well, then you can't be an expert on scripture.
I never said I was. I'm an expert in the Bible.
Well, then you can't be an expert on scripture.
I never said I was. It sounds like you're just mad that you can't defend your position. I've never once claimed that I am an expert. I'm an expert in the Bible.
So, seeing as that I may be dealing with someone whom claims to be an expert here he goes on to state that he's really gone through the book and not just glancingly. So we will listen to him state that and then test its merit.
And I've been through the book, and not just glancingly. I've really been through the book. And this book is full of lies. And do you think it's okay to punish people for other people's crimes?
No, man, you're so fixated on God being a bad guy.
That wasn't my question. Do you think it's okay to punish people for other people's crimes?
I don't. Wait,
okay.
Hold on a sec. I'm sorry. Do I think it's... Say that one more time.
Do you think it's good to punish people for crimes that they didn't commit but somebody else committed?
No.
Okay, so when God does it, is it good?
Give me an example.
Got one right here. 2 Samuel chapter 24, David is punished for, or he's reprimanded for taking a census. And this is the punishment God sends. It says, the Lord sent a pestilence on Israel from that morning until the appointed time, and 70,000 people of Israel were unalived from Dan to Beersheba. But when the angel stretched out his hand towards Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord relented concerning the evil and said to the angel who was bringing destruction among the people, it is enough, stay your hand. So because David sinned, God executed 70,000 Israelites. You think that's a good thing?
Do you understand the context of why this is happening?
Sure do, yeah, because David sinned. And the sins of the king and the sins of the priest can be transferred to the people. And I've been through the book. And not just glancingly. I've really been through the book. And this book is full of lies. And what's the thing that they did?
They have all the blessings in the world.
What's the thing that they did that they shouldn't be doing?
You tell me. You pick the story.
It's not in there. It's David's sin, which is why if you keep reading the story, it literally says, when David saw the angel who was destroying the people, he said to the Lord, I alone have sinned, and I, the shepherd, have done the evil. But these sheep, what have they done? Oops.
Now, as you've seen throughout this segment, to place this happening into actual perspective, the very first line of the chapter reads, again, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel. So, of course, not just David.
No, I would say just like look into the context of things.
I've read the Bible front to back multiple times.
Then I just don't really know what to say to that.
Yeah, that's why I know it's a book of lies.
So now that we know that Justin actually didn't have any context whatsoever in regards to what was happening here, or just tried to lie in regards to assert what he was wanting to, With that clear, we'll look into the text a little deeper, as here we have an overlay of David entreating God on behalf of the people. In essence, echoes, shades of Moses, Exodus chapter 32, verse 11. You will notice the bridge portrayed within the poetry as anger is likened to burning, and in essence alluding to why it was that the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, highlighting history's battle with negative habits throughout history.
There are events in history that are repetitive because human beings are really bad about learning their lessons.
So now that we have that clear, before we continue to correct what has been going on here, in the moment, for the actual sweethearts that may start feeling bad over this destruction of the deconstruction zone, this person has been speaking like this.
To come cry.
Look, I'll tell you one more time. This
Are you ready to defend your book?
If you're going to,
are you ready to defend your vile God?
Okay.
So after that being said, here we'll hear some more of their trumpeting before continuing to straight crush this quote deconstruction zone.
It happens to be that I am educated, and it sounds like you're not.
Well, you're not educated enough to.
I'm educated enough to
original
debunk
language of the
whatever
New Testament.
nonsense argument you're trying to bring right now. Go ahead and bring it.
Really?
I want to
want me to
hear
speak
your
English?
argument for why God is real. You're coming off like you're butthurt that you can't prove your God real.
No, we'll get into that. I promise.
Just because he
Okay,
doesn't
so-
have a PhD doesn't mean that he doesn't have a master's and bachelor's and did the time in seminary for this religion.
Yeah, so there's a really funny note in Genesis 36 that said that after some time had passed, that Jacob and Esau were living in the land of Canaan and that they departed and Esau went back to Edom. Well, this is problematic because if you're reading the story properly, Esau and Jacob never lived in the land. After they reunited, he went back to Edom. He didn't go to live in the land of Canaan with Jacob. So when we get like 8 chapters later and it says that they're living in the land together and that they had to depart because their flocks got too large for each other, there's a huge plot hole. When did he move back and reunite a second time? It's not even in there.
Before we bring clarity to Justin's confusion, as when it comes to a symphony, take note of the style and structure in composition which overlays Genesis chapter 2, which after the account of creation, there is an overview, an itinerary, a breakdown of the order of the events that took place.
This is problematic because if you're reading the story properly, Esau and Jacob never lived in the land. After they reunited, he went back to Edom. He didn't go to live in the land of Canaan with Jacob. So when we get like 8 chapters later and it says that they're living in the land together and that they had to depart because their flocks got too large for each other, there's a huge plot hole. When did he move back and reunite a second time? It's not even in there.
Now, we'll see here that it wasn't a matter of trying to express that they reunited a second time, but to bring all into context, we will begin with the blessing of Isaac. Heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. And we also know they had flocks of goats from the previous passages. Now, Esau is told by Yitzhak that his dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above, that he would live by the sword and serve his brother, and that when he grows restless, he would throw the yoke from his neck. And as we go on, we see that is exactly what happened.
If you're reading the story properly,
Now in Genesis chapter 26, verse 34, we see that when Esau was 40 years old, he married two Hittite women, one by the name of Judith, and the other we will hold on to and highlight, bookmark as a clue, by the name of Bashama. Furthermore, these quote Hittite women were a source of grief for Isaac and Rebekah. Now, going from the end of chapter 26 to the end of chapter 27, we see once again Rebekah complaining of the Hittite women. To then the beginning of chapter 28 is Isaac commanding Jacob not to marry a Canaanite woman. And now, as we read through verse 6, we read that now Esau learned that Isaac had blessed Jacob and did not want him to marry a Canaanite woman. Esau, then realizing how displeasing the Canaanite women were to his father, Isaac, and obviously, as we read earlier, displeasing to say the least to Rebekah. So he at that point went to Ishmael and married a daughter of his by the name of Mahalah. And now that we have zeroed in this scope and we actually have in full focus what the context is now and what has actually been taking place in this history, when we look back upon this review of what has taken place, you will notice that the wife that Esau married, which was the daughter of Ishmael, Mahalah, now has the name of Vashema, with now having the lesson that he has learned, that name being the last wife in which he displeased his parents. So, to atone for having the Hittite wives that caused his parents grief, the name of that latest wife, which was not a Canaanite, went by the name of the last time he displeased his father. Just like a correcting of the last time he was incorrect, that he displeased his parents when it came to this matter. As again, there is no contradiction nor mistake here. Justin simply misunderstood if he did not altogether try to purposely twist this.
Since I've been deconstructing and learning and reading and studying, found out that there were two sets
Thank you,
of
Shane.
10 commandments.
Three.
Are there two?
There's three sets, and the first set has 12.
What? Okay, so are they all the same?
Nope. They're all different.
How the fuck? What are we?
No
Okay.
one's reading this book. That's why they still believe it.
Now, one more time, the level of opposition here is a little disappointing, to say the least, from our expert, as anybody who considers themselves as such to be speaking of the commandments should know that there are ultimately 613 commandments. And though I hate to say that it almost sounds purposely coy, some of these callers and the statements that are called in, yet as these laws, these commandments were being preserved through the desert, of course they were also preserved within different books at different times. One of the quote set of commandments that they were speaking of was an actual rewriting of what you may more commonly know of as 10 Commandments, which were shattered upon coming down Sinai and seeing the worshipping of the golden calf, which was destroyed.
So okay, so you're going to be.
Can't
If
wait.
you leave, you concede. If you leave, you concede.
I'll take your
Okay.
confess your
Okay.
vile God.
Okay, so you're going to be rude.
I
Have a
can't
nice
wait.
day. Good.
I can't
goodbye.
If
wait.
you leave, you concede. If you leave, you concede.
I'll take your
Okay.
concession. See, this is
Well,
the
the Old
difference.
Testament original language is
This is
Hebrew.
the difference between me and you. Is I'm honest about my abilities. So
well, you're coming off like you're an expert, and
I'm
you
not
can't
coming
speak
off like
to
an
me.
expert. You're coming off like you're afraid of engaging in dialogue.
I'm going to put someone on who could speak Hebrew. Can you dialogue with them?
I already told you I couldn't.
Right. You need more help. You have any people? back
Yes. I've already told you that I would not be able to survive in Israel. I'm sorry this is difficult for you to understand. I've never once claimed that I have the level of Hebrew knowledge as a Hebrew speaker or a native Hebrew person. I have no reason to believe anything in this book, and you, a pastor, an actual professional who should know this book, can't find me one thing in here that would lead me to believe of its validity, but I can find you hundreds of things in here that would definitely move the needle against its validity. Do you think that the sun actually stood still for 24 hours?
See, you're just reverting back to what you know.
Yes, I'm reverting back to the book because I know the book is full of lies. And you do too. Yeah. And
No, I don't
you're
believe that.
obscuring the truth. You're trying to think that if you run away from the Bible, you can convince people of the truth of the Bible by ignoring the Bible. That's why I read this Bible every time I'm live, because the more you read this Bible, the more you realize it's full of lies. If the sun stood still for 24 hours, somebody on the planet would have wrote about it, because the oceans would have covered the earth. It would have annihilated everything on the planet, most likely.
Now it is fitting that we come to a battle of Yahshua and the Israelites, as it has been as if I am burning down each and every one of these skeptics, of these atheists, on their channels, through their videos, claim by claim, one after another. Now, though unfortunately he still must be put down by the sword of truth, the sword of the mouth. This one in particular, I don't blame him too much for, as he's been swayed by what has been a particular thought about this particular page of history. So we are going to go through this text carefully. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Yahshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Yisrael, as the rising sun would have been to their eyes. So Yahshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road, going up to Beth Haran, and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. Now we come to a part in this scripture that has been often overlooked, and that is as they fled before Yisrael on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them. And now we come to a detail just as important as that last passage was, and that is, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. And now we come to the famous passage of this history. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Yisrael, Yahshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Ayalon." Now, before we go on, clarifications in the translations passed down over time clarify that it does not only mean the sun stood still, but where relevant can be read as sun cease acting or sun stop working, encapsulating that all the elements of that day and night, from the sun rising in the face of their enemies to the irregularity of the hail, as this clearly is a call, a prayer for the day and night to continue as they were until the nation avenged itself on its enemies. Sun, stand still over Gibeon in the face of their enemies. The sun ceased working. The hail began in the middle of the day on the route down from Beth Horon. Now we will go on with what chronologically took place. The Israelites, after an all-night march, took their enemy by surprise. Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel then pursued them along the road, going up to Beth Horon, and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. And as they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon, after being attacked at dawn, defeated, and then routed, the hail began at midday, as we see the sun ceased in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. The hail began at midday and remained that way the rest of that day. This map makes it all the more clear as this fight began at Gibeon. Sun, stand still over Gibeon in the face of their enemies. The sun ceased working. The hail began in the middle of the day, chasing them to Beth Horon, as now pursuing them on down to Azekah and Makeda. Night began as we were at Ai Halong. Moon ceased working. In essence, keep hailing on the way down to Azekah and Makeda. So here, as we continue correcting and ultimately obliterating Justin's claims, unfortunately, this is another one where I expected a little more common sense from our expert, let alone as he wanted to breach this subject as if a particular chord was being struck, ignited within him with regards to his passions, which are about to be put out once again.
Did Jacob mate a bunch of flocks in front of striped poles so that striped animals would be produced? Did that happen?
Now once more, let us take out our microscope and increase the power, the zoom on our perspective, and behold what ultimately was an ingenious power move as it could be considered today. Now let us start to focus in on the context. Jacob just had his son Joseph and was wanting to leave his father-in-law's. And because Jacob was so skilled as a shepherd, Laban, his father-in-law, wanted him to continue to tend his flock and ultimately asked Jacob, "What shall I give you?" To which he replied, "Don't give me anything, but if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them." Going on to state, "Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat." Now Laban, his father-in-law, agreed, and that same day removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, and also the dark colored lambs. And then he gave them to Jacob's sons. And then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. So the flocks that were Jacob's were given unto his sons, while he continued to take care of Laban's flocks, which, needless to say, as he did not give Jacob all of his flocks, Laban was left with the spotless goats and the light lambs. Now here, keep in mind that we have one clue, a piece of vital evidence in regards to how one may have had to stay on top of their wits in this environment, being as, for example, Jacob first agreed to work 7 years for Rachel, but at the time received Leah until the following week. So now Jacob does something as genius as it is simple, that many, due to their lack of understanding in the moment, have tried to write off as just made up assertion of magical poles, when the reality of what happened is very grounded and once more as genius as it is sweetly simple. Now, once more, Jacob had the spotted, striped, and also the dark of the flocks and cattle. Thus, Laban had the spotless animals, the spotless flocks. So, the fact that Laban put 3 days between himself and Jacob's flocks outline for you the size of the area, let alone the large number of flocks which we are talking about. Now, Jacob took fresh cut branches and placed stripes within them, representing the striped flocks which belonged to him, which were to be a part of his flocks. Now, applying our common sense, when these flocks came to drink, he would pin them in, and the stripes on the poles are clearly indicators to his sons that could be seen from a distance as indicators that these he has chosen as his flocks to be herded into their portion of this land. And being as that Jacob was controlling the breeding when he would pin them in, you will notice ultimately there were no more unspotted flocks, as clearly at first Jacob chose the spotted and the darker animals, being as that his experience showed that mating with a spotless animal, the numbers were more in favor of a spotted or darker offspring, something that today science reinforces as correct with dominant and recessive genes. Now clearly this continued until the majority, if not all, of the cattle were striped and spotted and dark, as at first it was Jacob's proposition that he receive all of the spotted, the striped, and the dark. And as we see here, it got to the point where there were no more spotless or very few to give to Laban. It got to the point where he had to now also give Laban striped, spotted, and dark cattle. So then at that point, when he would pin them in, he would begin to pin in the strongest for himself and his sons, and he would not pin in or indicate the weaker, as to not make sure that they were herded into his flocks, leaving the weaker for Laban. Now usually I would not poke fun at anybody who simply didn't see something, didn't notice a detail, or etc. But here I have somebody claiming that they have gone through what is not only my history, but ultimately human history front to back, claiming lack of truth, furthermore, claiming lies due to their own misunderstanding and incapability to truly grasp what is meant within the text that they are reading. Now, there were some more things that Justin has mentioned cleared up as easily as what we have been seeing here thus far. So if he would like to address this or bring it up in open debate, I would be glad to behead him on every single topic.
For God.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, Daniel doesn't even know who the father of Belteshazzar is.
Now, when it comes to this, Justin, again, simply has severe lack when it comes to the depths of his understanding. Getting a grasp for the sense of speech in the time period. Here we'll see proof that referring to father and son chronologically can apply specifically to the dynastic timeline. To begin to elaborate on that, Ahaziah was 22 years old when he began to reign, and yet when it comes to the records of him being 42 years old, applies directly to the age of the dynasty. Now, getting even more specific to our text, getting back to Daniel recording Belshazzar as son of Nebuchadnezzar. When we look at what is called the Black Obelisk, it refers to Yehu as the son of Omri, and he was not the biological son of Omri. In fact, he succeeded by means of a coup, and in accordance with the style of speech in the moment, was still recorded as a son. This example directly overlays the situation in which Daniel recorded Belshazzar as a son of Nebuchadnezzar. As here we see Daniel recording Belshazzar as the son of Nebuchadnezzar, and Belshazzar reigned in place of his father Nabonidus while he would be away, his father who came to power by means of a coup. This similarity in context solidifies all the more that indeed the book of Daniel dates to the 6th century. And referring to a younger date due to the style of the copies found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, when it is known that those copies could even have been done in different languages as it was passed down through time, as is evident amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, which supplement the translations which Justin uses, and reinforce all the more that ultimately Alexander was shown the book of Daniel when he came to Israel. And this desperate attempt to skew this information throughout time shows itself all the more in a recent documentary of Alexander, in which he is shown to bow before the gates of what was at that place in time known as Egypt. However, The only historical records of anything like that even remotely happening was in Yisrael, in meeting with the high priest, Shimon. It is held that when Alexander's generals asked him why it is that he bowed, that he attributed the experience with dreams promising victories ultimately. Again, very much reminiscent of trying to express readings of prophecy.
Dissecting and performing surgery on your epistemology.
You're not fantastic, because if you actually read the rabbinic writings, you would recognize that Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Joseph are two. Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Joseph are two different people. They're not the same Messiah.
As by the grace of God, time itself continues to shed light and clarity on what our reality is.
In the end,
there can be only one.
Just one, not two. So we hope and we pray and we believe that these two figures can actually be united in one person. That there's a first stage, which is a Mashiach ben Yosef stage, and the second stage is the Mashiach ben David stage. David, when I say Yosef and David, I mean the two Mashiachim. Very important prophecy of Yechezkel by Ezekiel, that is the prophecy of the two sticks. That one stick is the stick of Joseph and the other is the stick of David, and he puts them together and they become one stick. The ultimate future. The ultimate future is Mashiach. The soul of Mashiach. The ultimate past is Adam. He's the first soul. He's the beginning. He's the first. The last is Mashiach. Who's the middle soul? So the Arizal says that the middle soul, even though he already lived, but he's still continuously alive. His life is going on, and he represents the present. The three souls, the Arizal says, are the initial letters of the word Adam himself, because they're all included within the very first one, Adam. And what does Adam stand for? Adam. It stands for Adam, David, Mashiach. And the present is David, Melech, Yisrael, Chai V'Kayim. We're living in that present. Those three souls, Adam, David, Mashiach, the present moment, which you cannot grasp at all, is David, Melech, Yisrael, Chai V'Kayim. David. And once more, we have beginning, middle, and end, and it all alludes to the secret, to the mystery of time, truth.
And speaking of the secret to the mystery of time, we are now about to see where I call in to speak to those at the so-called deconstruction zone myself, and I express that, of course, truth is revealed in time.
Man, they run away from God. Actually, we should have covered that. All right, we're going to get Landy Christ in, and then we're going to grab somebody from the YouTube queue after Landy Christ. Welcome in, Landy.
Hey there, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Perfect. I was going to begin with your topic today and show some proof where, as of God being good. Okay,
Do you think that God's all good or partly good?
I believe that God does everything for a reason, and of course that continues to be revealed to us. In fact, what I'm going to share with you has been...
But do you
go
believe
ahead.
he's all good or partly good?
All good or partly good?
Yeah.
I believe that that's not in the moment, excuse me. To be honest with you, it's exactly as I said. Everything is done for a reason. Whether you perceive something as good or bad...
Answer to the question. It's a very easy question. Do you believe that God is all good?
I believe that answer is revealed in time, to be honest with you, and that is the answer to your question.
The answer is a yes or no. Do you believe that God is all good?
Well, if I can give you the example, you could decide for yourself.
Mac, do you believe that God is all good? I do not. Oh, funny how that was an easy answer.
Okay. Well, being as that.
Yes or no? Do you believe that he's all good?
Thank you. Well, being as that no one knows what really happens after someone is, as you kids call it, unalived, yes, everything it does is for a reason, and ultimately God is good.
Okay, so God is all good.
As you just heard, Justin concluded that my answer is all good, whether you can perceive it that way in the moment or not. And now you'll see that he may have gotten struck with a little bit of brain fog as he asks me now, in essence, if it does anything bad, hoping to lure one into his little places where next time I may allow him just to blow him up wherever he wants to lead this to.
Okay.
Okay, so fantastic. Does he do anything that's bad?
To be honest with you, Justin, that goes back to the first thing that I said. In time, it's revealed what was ultimately good or bad.
The secret to the mystery of time. Truth.
Yes or no? I don't know why this is so hard. Does God ever do bad things?
Does it ever do bad things? That's not up to your perception, to be honest with you.
I'm asking you, in your perception, does God ever do bad things?
Thank you. And now that you're asking me, it's not a yes or no question, and time reveals all. In fact, if I may share with you some proof.
Answer yes or no questions.
May I share with you some proof?
You guys can't answer yes or no questions.
Thank you. May I share with you some proof which is scientifically backed that
it's a yes or no. Does your God ever do anything bad?
Ultimately, no.
Thank you. That's all you needed to say. Kenneth, thank you for the $5 super chat from New Zealand. Welcome in. Okay, so fantastic. So that means if I find anything in the Bible of your God doing something, you must believe that it is in fact good then, right?
I actually said that's not up to your perception in the time. I said that's actually revealed in time. That's my answer.
That was a yes or no question.
You keep saying they're yes or no questions. You keep saying that.
If I read you a passage from the Bible of God doing something, it must mean that the thing that he did was good?
One moment. You keep saying it's up to me to answer, and then after I answer you, you say no, only yes or no question. So if you'll excuse me.
When I ask you a question that is just a yes or no question, the only thing you need is a yes or no. Like if you ask me a yes
No, that's how people get driven around, Justin, as everybody in your chat knows.
No answer. So in order for me to know what you believe about your God, I need you to provide me with yes or no answers so I know what you actually believe about your God, because everyone believes something different about their God. Do you understand?
Well, if I may provide you with some empirical scientific proof showing the goodness of God, then that's peer reviewed, and everyone who reviewed it ultimately agreed, of course, that whatever it is good in that peer reviewed, of course, result was what it was. If I may, Justin, excuse me, I'd like to take you to Genesis 1:29, for example, which outlines a vegan and vegetarian diet.
Why?
As to answer his question here, as you'll see in a moment, he tries to squirm when we speak during this live. In Genesis 1:29, God instructs what is the outline of a vegan and vegetarian diet. And as per our conversation, proof of the goodness of God is revealed to us in time. For example, as there has been a study by Elizabeth Blackburn proving that such a diet has caused more than 500 genes to change in a span of 3 months, turning off genes which cause chronic diseases and turning on those which prevent them. Now, Justin has been found on his lives speaking like this.
Why does your God not heal children dying of cancer right now?
As here we will continue to reveal this goodness of God and why I am bringing us back to Genesis 1:29.
I think it's for all of us. None of us like change, and we like comfort. And even if the comfort's uncomfortable, we don't like to have to change things. And my wife and I have to deal with this on a daily basis in our practices, and that's diet. People don't like to have to change their diet. It doesn't matter how small of a change it is. They have to be motivated. And usually the motivation for most people is they have to be so sick that they can't do what they want to do. And so then they decide, okay, well, I guess I'll change my diet. Even at the chemistry level, we know it's about physics and it's about production of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is energy. And that process is not limited by time. It is only limited by the right molecules interacting in harmony to produce that energy. And actually, it was Fritz Albert Popp in the 80s who was working with Phil Callahan as well, who showed in his research in cancer that biophysics precedes biochemistry. And it is actually in living systems that it's the biophotons, the little particles of information that really determine what physically then will take place at the molecular level, let alone at the higher levels, tissues and organs and so on. And so we have that precedence there as far as study in physics.
And just as the Hebrew name for God is 4 letters composed of 3 letters in 4 places, for a total combination of 64, aligns as a mathematical signature within our very self, as our genetic code is made up of 64 different codons, ultimately a combination of 22 actions which parallels having 22 chromosomes outside of the sex chromosome. And in further realization of as within, so without, just as it is held that God created the universe using 22 letters and 10 divine numbers, as we see this formation within our very cell, 22 chromosomes, ultimately 22 actions of our genetic code, writing 3-letter scripts, paralleling 22 letters of our Hebrew alphabet from a basis of a 3-letter or triple root form. The Hebrew script is rooted in a base 10 decimal system. Our biblical texts are also based off a base 10 decimal system. In our genetic code, our genetic texts are scientifically shown to be synchronized, to be structured by a decimal system, a signature of God within our very cell. A scientific theory of dark matter approximates for every particle that can be seen are 10 that cannot be seen of equal mass. And as there are scientists which propose that virtual particles are the explanation for dark matter, the description of the 10 Sephirot are strikingly similar, such as the 10 Sephirot have the appearance of a lightning flash. And as we see here, virtual particles can sometimes appear as flashes of light. The Sefer Yet Sira reads that their origin is unseen and that no end is perceived. This is right in line with virtual particles seemingly coming out of nowhere or nothing and may have no end because they are a part of the fields that make up everything of divine order. Just as our writing system is based on 10, that number has been expressed in our material reality as a clock, as a calendar, as you see here.
The Kabbalistic model of 10 generations in the form of 10 Sfirot, 3, 3, 3, and 1. And when we reach that one at the end, whose name is Noach, then he has his 3 sons. Then, once more, we have 3, 3, 3, starting from Shem. Shem has here 2 functions. First, he's one of the 3 siblings, the 3 sons of Noach, and then he becomes the first of the next model. What does Kabbalah speak of? It speaks of a world possessing 10 Sfirot, 10 emanations, which are 3, 3, 3, and 1. And then we move to another world. A new world altogether that also has its 3, 3, 3, and 1. That's once more exactly the way that it's written in Chronicles. We have Shem and 3 generations, and another 3, and another 3, and finally we reach Abraham at the end.
Just as it is held that God created the universe using 22 letters and 10 numbers, here we see a self-similar overlay in that the 22 chromosomes of our genome, accompanied directly by the mitochondria, which is responsible for fueling our cells, fueling our bodies. Those 22 chromosomes, followed by that mitochondria, is a direct overlay of the 22 letters in which God created the universe, followed up by the encapsulating 10 utterances of creation, in which those 10 utterances directly outline the steps of creation, beginning with Genesis 1:1, and ultimately the 9th utterance, which is speaking of our creation, is immediately followed up with the 10th utterance, being Genesis 1:29, the outlining of the diet of the angel. So to review, directly after the holding of our creation is immediately how to sustain and fuel that creation, which is us, a direct overlay of the 22 chromosomes which make us up, immediately followed by the mitochondria.
And it's about production of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is energy,
which is responsible for fueling and powering our bodies. The 10th utterance, being how to fuel our bodies, overlays with the 10th generation in which it was stopped.
The Kabbalistic model of 10 generations in the form of 10 Sfirot, 3, 3, 3, and 1. And when we reach that 1 at the end, whose name is Noach, then he has his 3 sons. Then, once more, we have 3, starting from Shem. Shem has here 2 functions. First, he's one of the 3 siblings, the 3 sons of Noach, and then he becomes the first of the next model. What does Kabbalah speak of? It speaks of a world possessing 10 sfirot, 10 emanations, which are 3, and 1. And then we move to another world. A new world altogether.
Truly, I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away,
we move to another world. A new world altogether.
Clans of Judah, from you will come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient days.
Now, keep in perspective, there are those that would listen to that scripture and say to themselves that that time period in which it was written was already old and ancient. So what exactly does it mean, whose origins are of old and ancient days? As the scepter shall never depart from Yehuda, the 4th son of Yisrael, a signature of God that it controls the 4 dimensions of time and space. This is represented in the most surface infrastructure of the composition of the first verse in Genesis, 4 sevens to make up the 28 letters of the first verse of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, the angel Hezekiah, having greatly defended against the Assyrians, is most commonly associated with this text. However, along with the fact that he did not rule Assyria or Nimrod, we also get further perspective from the previous chapter reading in the last days. Now, when we look at Micah chapter 6, it's easy to overlook this detail. However, verse 7, not only focusing in on this specific verse, but also holding in mind the context of the previous chapters and including the question, what does it mean whose origins are of old and ancient times? Beginning with verse 7, on top of expressing what could possibly be good enough for God. When you read through the text, regardless which translation, whether it reads the word or not, the question of whether this verse intended to compare animal sacrifices with non-animal sacrifices is evident. And keeping in mind that out of you will come for me does not necessarily mean from Bethlehem, but of the fruitful that were inhabiting it. So now, once more, we'll go back to the question, what does it mean whose origins are of old and ancient times? And keeping in mind that this was not just a wartime prophecy, but with context from chapter 4, reading in the last days. Now using our 10 Sefirot as a compass, as a map, we'll remember that just as the decimal system based on 10, which literally is scientifically shown to be synchronized with the structure of our very self, the total number of the Sefirot to make up a full cycle in time, as it has been used to structure our generations, is 10.
The Kabbalistic model of 10 generations in the form of 10 Sefirot, 3, 3, 3, and 1. And when we reach that one at the end, whose name is Noach, then he has his 3 sons.
Now, following our map of the first 10 generations, further clarifying at this point, even with the intricacies of translations being whose origins are of old and ancient ways, whose origins are of old and ancient times. When we focus on and in the last days of the first 10 generations, according to the structure of our 10 Sefirot, in those last days there was Noah, and we see an overlay within what has been kept throughout those first 10 generations and ending with the last generation of the first 10 of Noah, which is the overlay with the 10 utterances, that 10th utterance outlining Genesis 1:29. And as we see it recorded in the book of Genesis and of Jubilees, Noah is made aware that his children would ultimately eat all kinds of flesh, and thus whose origins are from ancient times of ancient ways, is more so a marker of this return back to the original Genesis of our beginnings, as ultimately the name Adam itself in acronym form serves as a calendar, as a clock representing since Adam to David to Mashiach, which means Messiah or Christ.
The ultimate future is Mashiach. The soul of Mashiach. The ultimate past is Adam. He's the first soul. He's the beginning. He's the first. The last is Mashiach. Who's the middle soul? So the Arizal says that the middle soul, even though he already lived, but he's still continuously alive. His life is going on, and he represents the present. The 3 souls, the Arizal says, are the initial letters of the word Adam himself, because they're all included within the very first one, Adam. And what does Adam stand for? Adam. It stands for Adam, David, Mashiach. And the present is David, Melech Yisrael, Chai V'Kayim. We're living in that present. Those 3 souls, Adam, David, Mashiach, the present moment, which you cannot grasp at all, is David, Melech Yisrael, Chai V'Kayim. David. And once more, we have beginning, middle, and end, and it all alludes to the secret, to the mystery of time, truth.
And by the grace of God today, in these days, we are able to see that the total molecular weight,
even at the chemistry level, we know it's about physics and it's about production of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is energy. And that process is not limited by time. It is only limited by the right molecules interacting in harmony to produce that energy. Do we understand the physics behind that? Because who created the physics? Well, it was God who created the physics as well as the chemistry.
the total molecular weight of all 20 amino acids is 2,738, which is 74 times 37, and is the 37th even number. The number 37 being scientifically proven to be synchronized with the structure of our very genetic code. And when we minus 37 from the total molecular weight of all 20 amino acids, 2,738 minus 37 equals 2,701. The gematria, or in other words, the mathematical equivalent to the first verse of Genesis.
Because who created the physics? Well, it was God who created the physics as well as the chemistry.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
A word on the beginning, very beginning of the Torah. The Torah begins with two words, Breshit bara. In the beginning, Hashem created. The word bara in Hebrew means to create. And create, the Ramban, Nachmanides says that the only word in Hebrew which implies ex nihilo, was created, creating something from nothing, is this verb bara, something from nothing. But most interestingly, the verb bara also means briut, which is health, good health. So that's why there's a word that people darshan, Breshit bara, the beginning of bara, the first thing is be healthy. That's the very beginning of the Torah. A healthy body and soul, according to the way that people understood the body and the soul to operate together, was when there is proper balance between the four humors. What are the four humors? The word humor is very close to the Hebrew word for it, which is mara. The four marot, it's called, and also the four elements of the ancients. Health, according to the ancients, is the balance of these four hormones, we'll call them, these four humors.
Now, as of course my angel knows, this overlays with the 4 nucleotide bases of our genetic code. And in further highlighting the depths of the connections within creation, once fully formed, the source of the symphony of our cells is from a base of 4 nucleotides, which code in triplets, in threes. As our code of communication, the original Hebrew comes from a triple consonantal root. as does our DNA communicate, sends its messages via that triple nucleotide sequence which forms a codon. Those communications in triple form from the base of 4.
Order is the way that the campsites, called the Galim, the flags of the tribes were ordered, and they're reordered. It's a reordering process. They're reordered into 4 triplets. And the whole idea of a camp is that it's all together. It's an army, and the camp is an army. And the army is all operating and functioning together. And the way that it's ordered is in triplets. Each triplet also in time corresponds to the yearly cycle of the 4 seasons. The 4 seasons of the year, that each season has 3 months to it.
And as we have noted, Noah was made aware after the flood that the eating of meat, of flesh, would be studies tracing back our genetic code reinforces exactly that. Studies have shown that when decay in copy fidelity of our genetic code is projected backwards in time, it reaches, quote, perfection around 4000 BC, which is still around when Noah would have lived. We will get deeper into the subject of the flood in a future sharing. For now, here are some pieces of proof that you may not have been so familiar with, along with further proving Genesis 11, verse 1, that all the world was of one language. The ancient Chinese character for boat is made up of the characters for vessel, 8, and mouth, held to also represent people. The origins of these characters completely align with the records of Genesis, as in Noah's Ark there were 8 people: Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and their 3 wives. The character for garden is made up of the characters for dust, breath, 2 persons, and an enclosure, to mean garden. This parallels God making Adam and Eve in the garden, forming mankind from the dust of the earth. The Chinese character for naked consists of the characters for man and fruit, drawing a parallel to mankind eating the fruit and discovering that they were naked, as in Genesis. There are also more overlays within the characters. And as part of this history of the human race, of the angels, continues to come into focus, we are able to see parallels within the 6 days of creation and what is held as the border sacrifice. the Hebrew El Shaddai, and the Chinese Shangdai or Shangdi, both meaning God, and all the more proving our Genesis, our God, ultimately, is the fact that there were no images representing this monotheistic God, such as in the second commandment given unto Moses. With the I Ching actually shown to predate Chinese history, further evidence that this is technology preserved through the flood are the devices of divination described through our scriptures, such as when Yahshua was appointed to be next in line, and it was stated that the high priest would obtain decisions for him, inquiring to God through the Urim. Further insight into this revelation is in 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 41, where it in essence describes this device being utilized by the casting of lots. And when we look into the utilization of the Yi-Yang, we also see the parallel of a casting of lots. As here we have all the more perspective of the infinitely top tier technology that transcends time, which God has instilled in our universe and in us. As we see concepts which are the infrastructure of technology today has been based off of the utmost ancient. The I Ching that is based on the number 64 and so often associated with the total 64 spaces in chess, but also to the 64 codons of our very genetic code. And just as there have been many parallels between the 64 codons of our genetic code and the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, in essence, the properties of fractal math parallel the Yi-Yang as it does our very DNA. With fractal properties in its structure, its sequences, and electromagnetic resonance. A demonstration of fractal math.
You take a line and you divide it in half. Take each product of that division and apply that same previous step, and on and on and on into infinity, a recursive pattern.
We also see a fractal format in the only two numbers which times together are a gateway to the first verse of Genesis, 37 and 73. And even deeper still, we are able to see the fractal format of the first verse of Genesis itself. Such as here in the sequence of the geometric figures made up of the gematria of the first verse of Genesis. Getting as intricate as forming the 73rd triangular number and the mirroring of those numbers 37 and 73 within that central figure as depicted here. And as we amplify the power, the zoom of our microscope on the first verse of Genesis, we see that it is composed of a symphony of sevens. Further substantiating these tables of divination, these ancient technologies overlaying the very interworkings of our very bodies, is the 72 letter names of God, which are written in 3-letter words, such as our very DNA. These 72 names of God particularly used to cross the sea of reeds. Even closer parallel to the works of our very bodies, the 216 numbers in triplet form which make up the 72 names of God parallel what is held as Metatron's cube, our Merkaba having a pattern of 216 numbers, our Merkaba being held as a chariot throughout the 4 dimensions of time and space, in its purest depth, representing our very body. These parallels of these clocks, these calculators, are showing that even these tables parallel the very functions, the very structures of our bodies. The Sefer Yetzirah, holding that God created the universe using 32 paths of wisdom. And not only are there 32 transfer RNAs serving as physical links within our body during the processes of our DNA, but also senses of the human body, the body of the angel. Here we see a depiction of a table famously held within the Sefer Yetzirah of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet placed in a circle with a total of 231 connections between them, as displayed here in form of mathematical formula. As with many of these topics, there are further details as to this in other sharings of mine, but Enoch, being born about 400 years ahead of Noah, also aligns with the holdings that it was indeed Enoch which architected the pyramids. Again, further proof as to this fact are found in my other sharings, such as over 80 mathematical and physical constants, such as pi being encoded within the Great Pyramid, a mathematical constant which the Egyptians, the Sumerians, and overall Babylonians were all off by the numbers in which they were. Once more, this demonstrated in other sharings, which of course you can look up. For years, it was claimed that pi was written in error in 1 Kings and in 2 Chronicles, mistakenly recorded as 3. However, when reading just a little further, an important detail is noted which reflects that it was completely accurate as to the mathematical constant of pi, as you see here. Before we move on to further proof of Genesis chapter 11, verse 1, that all the world was of one language, here we see how the formation of the numbering system was preserved throughout the years by the Hebrews. Here you will see proof that the hieratic is actually the original Hebrew characters. When you look it up, you will find that there have been hundreds of archaeological findings of this Hebrew hieratic being used throughout the Davidic kingdom's time period. you will also find that writings by the Zadokite line, which is the line since Aaron, brother of Moses, were also done in this original Hebrew, as well as other scrolls found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, as it has been so far in Israel. Not only what has been called the oldest written, quote, religious inscriptions found in these original Hebrew characters, but as you are about to see here, it has been confirmed by experts in this very field that these inscriptions are indeed Hebrew, as you are seeing here. Now, archaeological findings are now proving that, quote, hieratic, that original Hebrew script, did not come after hieroglyphics. And furthermore, as you see here, archaeological findings are proving that ultimately that original Hebrew is also not younger or after the writings in Sumer. And as you see here, unlike what was held as usual secular consensus, it is indeed this Hebrew that later the Canaanite and Phoenicians also used without gematria. Now we'll again take a look at further gematria and mathematical alignments, such as the numerical equivalent to the first verse in Genesis 2701, the 73rd triangular number, the formation of a pyramid, continue to reveal the genius in our Genesis. As Genesis 1:1 and those 7 words consisting of 28 letters, which is the 7th triangular number that foreshadow the outline of the 7 days of creation, mathematically form the last of the original 7 wonders of the world, and is held to be made by the 7th patriarch since Adam, Enoch. Even further miraculous alignments via letters infused with numbers serving as mathematical devices completely aligns the book of Isaiah chapter 19 verses 19 and 20 with the Great Pyramid itself, as every letter equates out to 5,449, which is ultimately the height in pyramid inches up to the capstone summit of the Great Pyramid. This trait of perfect precision is a unique signature as to the gematria being original to the Hebrews, and what was ultimately an imitation of gematria by the Babylonians called Aru is renowned to have not been able to be the origin of gematria, as it assigned values to whole words arbitrarily. In other words, the values were just made up for whatever reasons and alignments there were in the moment. Moreover, this degree of intimate knowledge of the pyramid is further proof of it indeed being architected by Enoch. And as displayed here, the accuracy of that scripture being as the pyramid is literally in the middle, in the midst of Egypt. As also Giza can mean border. And as time, by the grace of God, continues to reveal all things, all the more we have the return of that pure language which was promised. And as history continues to become all the more clear, we see how the truth aligns like the stars themselves. As we have accounts of history, such as Abraham teaching astrology amongst other sciences to the Egyptians, and of course accrediting that knowledge to Enoch. There are a number of historic accounts which reflect the same. As ultimately, this information was passed down since Adam and Eve. And as also is consistent with the world at one time being of one language, it is known that through different times and places, Enoch was known by different names such as Thoth, Hermes, Zarathustra, Idris, and Saurid, Enki, as well as Atlas. And though the names may have varied, the preservation of the sciences of writing and also the calendar, all of this is consistent with the historical record of Enoch. And as Enoch is accredited with passing down the sciences such as mathematics and astrology, as he is also accredited with passing down the architecture of the pyramid, we see that those disciplines are reflected from the pyramids themselves, such as with the alignment of the stars.
So we're going to try Enoch. Should be interesting.
You're not canon. Sorry.
I mean, in the Ethiopian Bible, I suppose. But the Book of Enoch is a really fun read, to be honest.
I have it in my wish list. I haven't read it yet, but I hear great things. I heard this a fantastic fan fiction.
It really is. Welcome. Welcome in, King.
We're going to be returning to the live call between Justin and myself, but first, to clear up this matter in regards to claiming Enoch is fan fiction. It is true that the cosmic order of the very stars by their organization is in sync exactly with the calendar, and proof of exactly that is the castle pyramid, a calendar represented in stone, both with its architectural layout of having a body of water underneath, such as renowned to be the case with the pyramids around the world, and also representing the calendar of the angels with its features, it proves all the more Genesis chapter 11 verse 1 that all the world was of one language. And reinforcement of that is that it is held that the 7 lighted triangles and the 6 dark triangles, which takes place at both the spring and the autumn, the fall equinox, represent the 7 days of creation, of course, exactly just as the account of Genesis. This masterful genius, displayed, channeled through architecture by the grace of God, shows that this calendar has been and is indeed perfect, let alone without calendar drift, as precisely 182 days pass between the 2 equinoxes, 182 days of course being half of the 364-day year. And if need be, perhaps in the near future, we can do a recount to make sure to reaffirm this fact, that the arrangement of the very stars follows the order within the calendar passed down since Adam and Eve. Thus, the phenomena at the castle pyramid. And just as there are 4 dimensions of time and space, and also the number 7, as in Genesis, stands for a cycle in time, we see that the 364-day calendar is divisible by both 4 and 7.
The group that wrote the scrolls dated their festivals every year according to a 364-day calendar. This group had a 364-day calendar which is exactly divisible by 7, so that the same date fell on the same day of the week every year. It never changed. And this had some advantages, such as festivals never falling on the Sabbath.
And when we look at the first verse of Genesis, which at its most surface infrastructure is made up of 4 sevens to come out to 28 letters, being orchestrated in a composition of 4 sevens, overlaying with there being 4 beats in a note, and a symphony being made up of 4 parts, 4 movements, reinforces all the more that throughout the ups and downs, the movement of what can be life itself, God never falls out of rhythm, nor has ever missed a beat. The numbers 4 and 7, such as the 4 dimensions of time and space, and the first cycle in time recorded in Genesis 7, continue to reflect one another, as the first verse of Genesis is made up of 28 letters, once more at its most surface infrastructure, 4 sevens. Those 28 letters equate to being the 4th hexagonal number and the 7th triangular number. This reflecting our calendar, the calendar of the angels, being divisible by 4 and 7. And now here we'll see the very features of the calendar castle pyramid, which represent the 364-day calendar which was passed down to Enoch since Adam and Eve, preserved through the flood since Noah and Emzara to their children, preserved and protected through time down to the warrior angels in Qumran. Now to the features of that very calendar etched into an edifice, into this work of art, which proves Genesis 11 verse 1, that all the world was of one language.
In the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have numerous documents who are talking about solar calendar, of pre-calculated calendar emerging, commencing in the spring. While the Jewish calendar, known to all of you who are following the Jewish calendar, is starting in the autumn. The current Jewish calendar is starting in the autumn, in the month of Tishrei, while the biblical calendar states explicitly that the calendar starts in the spring. In the book of Exodus 12, we are told that the calendar is commencing in the month of the spring, the first month of the year, where the year is starting as a divine declaration of the beginning of freedom, of the epoch of freedom. It is given up in the time where the story of the departure from Egypt, the exodus from Egypt, then there is a calendar introduced, and it is said, this month, the month of the spring, is the head of the year, or the first of the month. You would always start to count from the first month. Is the presence of a solar calendar. A calendar which the writers ascribe to a mythical ancient past. The people who had authored the book of First Enoch, it's called the Ethiopian Enoch because it was first known to us in the language of Giz, which is an Ethiopian language, Semitic Ethiopian language. In the book of Enoch, chapter 72-82 is telling us in great detail on the calendar of 364 days. In the book of Psalms that had been found in Qumran, entirely different genre, you know, Psalms. In the extra Psalms, those which are not known to us in the Bible, in the Psalm scrolls which is presented in the shrine of the book, in column 27 we are told that David, king of Israel, the one who had been described as wise and as poetically gifted and as a prophet according to this scroll, had authored 364 daily songs for each day of the year. He further had authored 52 sacred songs for every one of the Sabbaths of the years. He further authored 18 special songs for the holidays of the year. Now, in entirely different kind of genre, let's say the book of Jubilees, which is para-biblical because it is retelling the book of Genesis. In the book of Jubilees, we are told that Noah had stayed in the ark 364 days, which are divided equally to 4 seasons of 91 days, commencing in the spring. The same is true for the scroll of priestly watches, which is worked on a calendar of 364 days. The same is true to a letter called Miktzat Maaseh Torah, a few observations on the acts of the Torah. The scroll is commencing with a calendar, telling us that the first week of the year starts in the spring, and there are 52 weeks in every year, and in each week a different priestly scroll is serving according to a calendar of 364 days. Now, the centrality of the solar calendar could not be exaggerated in the library of Qumran. As I said, in various different genres, in various different literary modes, the centrality of the calendar is put forward. It was a priestly calendar, divided according to the priestly sevenfold divisions. Because if there was anything sacred to the priestly calendar, it was the following assertion: the covenant between God and his people is based on the following fact: every 7 day one should not work on a Sabbath. Every 7 holidays of the first 7 months of the year, one must refrain from work according to the biblical law.
And further testament to the goodness, to the greatness of our literally Almighty God is the fact that the 4th commandment is to remember to observe the Sabbath. Notice a connection again between 4, as in the 4 dimensions of time and space, and the number 7, since Genesis standing for a cycle in time and is the 7th day of the week, the Sabbath. And to put this as closely as possible, just as any loving parent would do for you, in time you find out that what was commanded of you was ultimately for your own good. And beautifully, science shows that aspects of our biology, our very bodies, operates on a 7-day cycle. And to say the least, once more, this calendar, this 7-day cycle has been passed down since Adam and Eve, ultimately passed on to Moses, who passed it on once again to the Israelites, the Hebrews in the desert. And as we see 7 representing a cycle in time in all the ways that it does, such as Jericho being circled 7 times on a 7th day, which is a conversation in itself. And as we are blessed with living in a time where we are able to see such revelations, it makes all the more clear Revelation 5:5 and the breaking of the 7 seals, as it is a complete honor, of course, to share this reality. and as it will connect together in a few moments. Tracing back our biblical chronology, Noah's Ark and the flood happened approximately 4,000 years ago. And when you take a look at the timeline of the life of Enoch, it overlays exactly with the fact that pyramids around the world are dated to be approximately 4,500 years old, and consistent with the knowledge passed down through Enoch is the architectural trait of the alignment with the stars, as well as the bodies of water found underneath the pyramids. This trait overlays with the body of water described to be flowing from underneath the temple outlined within Ezekiel and seen in temples, castles, pyramids throughout the world. These streams, these lakes of water, of liquid, are just as much purposeful as they are beautiful. This characteristic in design is found throughout the world, as we are seeing here. And being as purposeful as they are beautiful, these channels of water underneath these edifices are held to serve for the purposes of physioelectricity. And just as the pyramids serve as a realization of as within, so without, in that they are encoded, they house mathematical and physical constants which serve as the infrastructure of our universe. It brings all the more credence to the quote, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe so the soul. And yet another depth of the pyramids serving as a reflection of as within, so without, is their capability, is the feature of physio-electricity, which reflects our very body's capability of physio-electricity. As by the grace of God, I have been blessed with reaching these levels.
In 2002, scientists made the exciting discovery that calcite microcrystals exist on the pineal gland, and that these crystals can interact with electromagnetic fields.
These crystals have piezoelectric properties with excitability in the frequency range of mobile telecommunications. They theorize that the interactions of these crystals with Global System for Mobile Telecommunication Waves could constitute a new mechanism of transduction of the pineal membrane. What this means in layman's terms is that our pineal gland is a cell phone. The wireless transmitter that links us with universal consciousness is our pineal gland. And two Israeli researchers made an astounding discovery. They discovered that there's two types of crystals on and in the pineal gland, and that these crystals actually are tuners or resonators that, if stimulated by sound, these crystals have the piezoelectric effect. They release a positive charge. And this is quite amazing.
This also, as you are about to see, in so many ways, was always said to come. And just as it has been held that mankind was created at a stage, at a height, where it had such ingenious, God-given information infused within it, of course, how long could it have possibly taken anyone to develop a written script that infuses both the written word and mathematical expressions? How long would it have taken a human being to align physical edifices with the stars themselves, the same types of buildings which they cannot recreate today? And as we continue to relearn and understand all the more this information, it brings all the more clarity to the holding that God made Adam and Eve at an age of 20, and that upon the resurrection, mankind would return to an age of 20. That resurrection being the revival of our true history as we are coming upon it now, that age of 20 representing a height of consciousness as it is represented on top of the calendar, castle, pyramid. And as it will only become all the more clear that it is God itself that reigns over the four dimensions of time and space, these heights that we are now reaching by the grace of God brings to mind four words which were the dawn of the precursor to the text message, to electronic mail, Morse code, which read, "What hath God wrought?" A highlight of the height of technology at the time. And God, being the creator of what is both original and also the most innovative, I, being the very line of Christ, the Mashiach, has come with the introduction of gifts which represent a full circle, and Eden to Eden, which represent the evolution of the human being, and ultimately the full circle of the angel.
What we can say about the Mashiach is the Mashiach, in a certain way, to use a term from biology, from evolution theory, the Mashiach is definitely, in a certain way, a new positive mutation of mankind. It is like a quantum leap of humanity to a new place. Almost to say that a new species of mankind is appearing on the scene of reality.
As here we will see how this gift from God is indeed holy, which means to be set apart, special, as again it is the glory of God to entrench or to hide a thing. It is the honor of queens and kings to seek them out. And we are now at a place in time where we see that every bit of our world has been fine-tuned to reveal and to harness this very gift. The alignment of the discovery that in fact our DNA is a fractal antenna able to pick up electromagnetic fields, including the ranges of radio frequency, overlaying with the holding that when Mashiach, which means Messiah or Christ, comes, that the radio channels will be a different scene, a different vibration. And again here, we are now in a time that we know our very DNA channels radio frequency.
Of the world. And the first thing that happens when Mashiach comes is that all of the radio channels, it's all a different scene, a different vibration.
A part of the holistic process of picking up those radio frequencies is the newly discovered the fourth phase of intracellular water structure, which is used for energy and also to store and transmit information. And just as that fourth phase of intracellular water structure is a hexagonal structure, this overlays with the first verse of Genesis being 7 words made up of 28 letters, which is the 7th triangular number and the 4th hexagonal number, overlaying with the 4th stage of intracellular water structure, and being a perfect number is a signature of the kingdom of heaven being within you. That 4th stage of intracellular water structure being a crystalline substance perfectly overlaying with God encoding the entire Torah in a crystalline substance.
New interpretations of the text now suggest the entire Torah was encoded into a crystalline substance, not necessarily a crystal, or the crystalline substance that fit into the palm of a single hand. And when the Ark of the Covenant is revealed and made public, we will see that is the case.
Along with the fourth stage of intracellular water structure, and our DNA being a fractal antenna, the physioelectric processes within our body due to the microcrystals within our brain allow for the picking up of radio frequencies, which is showing to be the precursors, potentially, to telepathy, as you see an example of here.
We do know that Earth's magnetic fields affect everything from our mood to our ability to learn. Even stranger, research has begun to prove links between the electromagnetic field of our planet and psychic abilities. Could these crystals act like tiny antennas, connecting our brains to each other and to the entire planet? This is Dr. Michael Persinger, a neuroscientist who has argued that all phenomena, including consciousness, spiritual experiences, and even paranormal events, can be explained by physical mechanisms, and they can be verified using the scientific method. Since 1971, he has been researching electromagnetic field effects upon biological organisms. And some of his recent studies sound straight out of a sci-fi movie. Dr. Persinger has shown in the laboratory that magnetic brain stimulation can create mental states conducive to human telepathy. A recent experiment placed two people at a distance in different rooms. Each was surrounded by an identical computer-controlled magnetic field. When a light was flashed in one subject's eye, the person in the other room showed responses in their brain as if they saw the flash of light. As Dr. Persinger stated, we think that's tremendous because it may be the first macro demonstration of a quantum connection, or so-called quantum entanglement. If true, then there's another way of potential communication.
Now, being blessed with this gift from God, the agencies that have been looking for this activity, or more so hoping it wouldn't come along so they wouldn't get caught, of course are needing a transcranial magnetic stimulation device, which they use to not only peer into your thoughts, to peer into your dreams, but also look out through your very eyes and stare at your very loved ones naked throughout whatever moments of intimacy or whatever moments within your mind that you thought you kept to yourself. This is a fact, and this is going on now. Now, as I said, they need a transcranial magnetic stimulation device in order to do this. I am doing this by our original God-given tech, with no such controlled environment, no such appliances or equipment on my body whatsoever. More on this and specifically can be found within the sharings displayed here.
I think a couple arguments that really help out with this is the fact that God could not have created anything. So first of all, he could not create time and he could not create space, and it was never created. In my, that's your problem. You keep using the word create, and create is not the appropriate word. If the universe is eternal, then it was never created. Creation, any act of creation at all, okay, requires a change of states, yes or no? You keep using the word create, and create is not the appropriate word.
Now, even setting those contradictions to the side, we are about to see here that when it comes to the topic of creation, a lot of these so-called skeptics, whom claim to know what they are speaking of, truly can't even get past the first verse of Genesis, let alone the following verses and the ancient scriptures which are ultimately a part of it, as you're about to see here.
In my particular worldview, I subscribe to the elastic universe or the rebound universe or the Big Bang, Big Crunch universe.
Now, given our knowledge and understanding now, when it comes to, quote, modern day science, we're able to see how modern day science is actually catching back up with or coming back around full circle to being able to show the extents of science's explanation of the creation of our universe parallel, in other words, match that of the beginnings of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty, void. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Now, the first element known to us is hydrogen. The word for hydrogen in Hebrew is mayim, originally at root, meaning waters, and hydrogen being a gas. Still, that word is right in line with the etymological roots of the very word for hydrogen being water forming. Now, as you see here, the word mayim denotes water, fluid, liquid of just about any kind. As we see here, the extents of science's reach is still completely consistent with the depths of the meanings of waters within Genesis. What may have been thought to solely be poetically placed is shown to be true via scientific proof. As it continues to read, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light." And as a hydrogen atom has the appropriate interaction with an electron, this emits light. Furthermore, the 137 constant, the measure of the strength of the electromagnetic force that governs how electrically charged elementary particles and light interact. The number 137 permeates throughout the topic of this process, as light is 137 times faster than an electron. We look at Genesis, we'll see that the 37th word falls upon the 137th letter, that word being light, and describing the designed function of the 137 constant, which measures the strength of the electromagnetic force that governs how electrically charged particles interact with light. As it reads, God divided the light from the darkness. This extends to the creation constantly going on within our very bodies, as the number 37 is renowned to overlay the inner workings of our genetic code, and our cells, our DNA, communicates at the speed of light and via light. As our cells communicate not only with one another, but ultimately with the quantum fields, the universe, the heavens all around us. Now, prior to even the first element, science holds that the universe began with a singularity prior to what is renowned as the Big Bang. This parallel runs even deeper with historical records such as the Kabbalistic holding that everything began with God concentrating its energy into a central point, which parallels the consensus of the extents of modern day science. Now, this highlight of the universe beginning with a single central point is further encoded within the gematria of the first verse of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. As the Hebrew word for point is nekuda, which has a gematria of 165. 165 is also the exact center point of 329, which is the ordinal gematria of the first verse of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And even deeper still, the product of 165, the gematria for Nekuda, and 329, the ordinal gematria of the first verse of Genesis, is 54,285, which is not only the 329th triangular number, but not only does 54,285 appear within the numbers that make up the mathematical constant known as pi, but it does so at the 2,701st index. The full gematria, the mathematical equivalent of the first verse of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Mathematical constants make up the infrastructure of our very universe, of our world, and the fact that the consensus of science aligns with our ancient holdings that the universe began with a central point, a singularity that in essence was a dense dot, a point which is ultimately a perfect circle, completely correlating why the mathematical constant known as pi, which is the relationship between a circle and its diameter, why this mathematical constant would be a key in creation. And just as we saw that the product of the gematria of Nekuda, which means point, and the ordinal value, the ordinal gematria of the first verse of Genesis, first appears at the 2,701st index. Here we are seeing that mathematical equivalent of the first verse of Genesis first appears within the index of pi at the 165th fifth place, mathematical equivalent of the Hebrew word for point, nekuda. And yet, even deeper still, the Hebrew word Torah, meaning teachings, doctrine, instruction, or law, often used to represent the Bible, has a numerical value, a mathematical equivalent, a gematria of 611. And when we add up the sum of the first 611 digits within the index of pi, it equals 2,701, the mathematical equivalent of the first verse of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And to those in disbelief, or to those who just want to behold all the more how this painting was portrayed by our God, to view several ways in which pi has been encoded within the first verse of Genesis. That display, approximately a half an hour to 40 minutes long, can be found throughout my sharings, such as Christ clarifying our actual beginnings, and of course by reviewing the work of the angels named here. And further connection between the first verse of Genesis and pi is the fact that the first verse in Genesis is made up of 7 words that come out to 28 letters, and the first 7 digits of pi after the decimal point, those first 7 numerals equate to 28. 7 words in Genesis 1:1, 28 letters, 7 digits after the decimal point of pi equate to 28. The Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation, which holds that God created the universe using 22 letters and the numbers 1 through 10. Now we are able to see an overlay between the consensus of modern day science as to the beginnings of our universe and the orchestrated order of the 22 letters portrayed and outlined in the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation, also known as the book of creation, where it is held that of the 22 letters passed down since Adam and Eve, after Eber, known as the Hebrew alphabet, there are 3 mother letters which began creation. This parallels the first 3 elements after what is renowned scientifically as the Big Bang, known to have begun with what is scientifically held as the singularity, central point held Kabbalistically and further proven within the depths of the first verse of Genesis, So thus far, we have a direct parallel between the first three mother letters of Aleph, Mem, and Shin, and also the first three elements, hydrogen, helium, and lithium. Next, it reads in the Sefer Yetzirah 7 doubles. And when we take a look at what science holds as the first 7 elements created in stars after hydrogen, helium, and lithium, we see a particular pattern continue where the number of protons and electrons skip 2 single units, in essence, a double. It is further held in the Sefer Yetzirah that the next 12 letters, which complete the 22 letters, are, quote, simples. Scientifically, those next 12 elements are considered simple elements. And perhaps further revelation will reveal which exact letters correspond with which exact elements. As for example, iron is also a simple element which develops within the stars. And though almost every element up to iron can be considered simple, it's a reminder to bear in mind that these traits are found throughout the elements, such as the doubling of protons and electrons, also throughout the 3 mother letters. However, it is still categorized as the 3 mother letters, distinguishing being the first. All the more highlighted, paralleling God creating the universe using 22 letters and the numbers 1 through 10, as we saw earlier, a scientific theory of dark matter. For every particle that can be seen are 10 that cannot be seen of equal mass. And as there are scientists which propose that virtual particles are the explanation for dark matter, the description of the 10 Sephirot are strikingly similar, such as the 10 Sephirot have the appearance of a lightning flash. And as we see here, virtual particles can sometimes appear as flashes of light. The Sefer Yetzirah reads that their origin is unseen and that no end is perceived. This is right in line with virtual particles seemingly coming out of nowhere or nothing, and may have no end because they are a part of the fields that make up everything. And by the grace of God, we are now able to see all the more clearly realizations of the depths of God encoding the entire Torah in a crystalline substance, using the 22 letters and the numbers 1 through 10 to create the universe. Now, without further ado, we will return to the recording of of our live conversation with the so-called deconstruction zone.
Well, it's your question is God good? And in Genesis 1:29, it outlines.
God says in Genesis chapter 9 that you can eat the animals.
Excuse me, sir. I said first Genesis 1:29. We could definitely go through how that began to happen, which, as you know, is after the flood, of course.
So, is it your position that killing animals is wrong?
And if I may, when you look up different sects, such as the Ebionites.
You can't answer a single question. Is it your position that killing animals is wrong?
Justin, just one moment. I was already in the midst of saying something before.
I'm going to need you to answer a question and stop running from all my questions. Is it your belief that killing and eating animals is wrong?
There are sects such as the Ebionites that did not eat meat and also didn't sacrifice animals.
Did not eat meat? Okay.
Here's where Justin decided to run.
Instead of being a man and actually having a civil conversation, he decided to cry and run. If you leave, you concede. If you leave, you concede.
A lot of these angels speaking through their TikTok portals or YouTube channels seem to catch cabin fever and go mute happy. And once they're not in control of the flow of a conversation, well, you get this result. But unfortunately, him nor any other are not one to lead me around. As I stated before, and as we saw earlier, they can't even get off of the first verse of Genesis, let alone go through the rest of this history with me. You'll also note that I did address every one of his questions, though the answers may not have been as he would have liked. That simply is what it is, including answering his last question, which he spread out into multiple forms, asking, is it my position that it's wrong to kill animals or eat meat? And I answered him that there was a sect that, just as like the Yahad in Qumran, did not necessarily go by which was attributed to them, however, historically have been held as the Ebionites, which were actually with the actual line of Christ, a voice of which you are listening to right now. And once more, recollecting the scripture, one of whom's origins are of old and ancient days. As you see here, the pre-flood diet was held and also done so by not only John the Baptist, known to live off of dates and honey, but also James the Just. So once more, recollecting the scripture whose origins are of old and ancient ways, and bearing in mind the calendar, the clock, that the name Adam serves as an acronym form, since Adam to David to Mashiach. Here you see that it is held in the book of Jubilees, a part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, preserved and protected by the Yahad, the Hebrews in Qumran, in the midst of war with Rome. It is held in the book of Jubilees that the very first sacrifice was non-animal, done by Adam.